Bam! Welcome back to my DIY Expedition Camper build series. This is video number 100 of this Expedition Camper build series. And right now we're on to my first finished pieces going into this camper. This is the dining room tabletop and my electrically slide out dining table. If you remember back a few videos, this whole tabletop can actually support me hanging from it and doing pull-ups from it. That's how strong this is. And it's a tabletop that needs no latches or anything to hold it out in any position, ready to go. So here we go. We're finally getting into some finished materials and starting to make this DIY Expedition Camper pretty cool after starting from scratch and building this thing entirely from the wheels up. So here we go. And you may remember I'm using a single Progressive Automations linear actuator to move this out, but I have to do a slight little mod. Alright, so I got a little problem installing my beautiful new dinette table, and I'm trying to install this on top of my frame here, my aluminum frame. And the one challenge I have is that you can probably see it here, the mount for the linear actuator actually is wider than 1 inch wide, which is my width of my frame here. This shaft is about 13/16 in a width, so just a little over 3/4 of an inch, but it's got the hole going the wrong way. So you can see it there, and there's really no way to rotate that or turn the shaft. It seems to be a solid shaft all the way down. So what I'm going to need to do is go ahead and drill another hole directly through this way, so that way I can mount on each side, essentially an angle mount on each side, and do a bolt through that or a pin through that. And that way those will be flush with the width of my frame here, or the height of my frame in this case, so that my countertop will be able to go flush over this. I don't want it protruding up, particularly with this pin. It was sticking up quite a bit right here. You can kind of see that perhaps. A little bit difficult to tell, but it actually sticks up a lot, too much so that this countertop would just be raised up. And so I've got to get rid of that or do it through this way. And so that's why I'm going to drill a hole through this solid aluminum shaft here going through this way. And also at the bottom of this, I'm going to face it here with a solid sheet of carbon fiber, this sheet of carbon fiber right here, and that's going to give it some more torsional, add a little bit of strength, and also give a nice smooth undercarriage as well. So I've got to take this off and drill it, and to make that all come together. Okay, so what you have to do here is something you probably don't want to necessarily have to do, but it is a way to modify something like this, a linear actuator in this case, to help work for the situation I need. And that is that this solid aluminum shaft doesn't rotate, right? Has the holes going in the wrong direction I need them. It's such a tight fit in there inside of my dining room table, and the top and the bottom of it, that I'm going to need to drill another hole directly through here. So what I'm going to do is, fortunately, this has a very flat, smooth bottom here. So I can put this flat, smooth bottom on here, make sure it's very much flat against my table, hold it there. I may go ahead and clamp it down, but just try to get it lined up with this point right here, the same center point, and just go right through that so I can get a bolt going through the opposite direction. So that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm also going to work on another thing to modify the mount slightly different in another way, and I'm going to do that in a moment. I'll show you that. Okay, so now that I've got this lined up, I've got my center point on the shaft and also lined up center with this other hole here. So now I'm going to hold this shaft down, or hold the linear actuator down. Remember, I'm only drilling through a solid aluminum shaft at the end here, and I'm going to keep my vacuum on, suck up all the dust, debris and stuff. I don't want aluminum chunks getting into the seal here, so make sure you keep that clean and just go very carefully down. Don't want to put a lot of pressure, just go very light. I have a clamp here just very lightly clamped on just to stabilize it and hold it, because I have a 40-inch shaft going out that way, and with the weight on the other end, since that's where the motor is. So here we go. Okay, that went very, very well. I could actually see it going through the two holes here, and they're pretty much exactly aligned. They look like they're just two perfect circles that made up with each other. So I think I've got that just great. While I have the vacuum on and sucking the debris through the hole here in the drill press table, that kept all that debris from going through. So now I'm just going to take a file, just give it a little bit of cleaning out just to make sure I've got all the smooth edges here. And now that's a 1/4-inch hole, so I can put a 1/4-inch bolt or pin through there the opposite direction. And it's all the way at the end. The shaft's all the way pulled in right now, so nothing's going to connect in with the seal there or not. So I'm going to get that cleaned up. And then what else I'm going to do is I actually want to try to do the same thing on the other end. This is going to be easier because this shaft, you can see, or mounting plate, is again just a solid piece of aluminum, and it is actually flat on both ends. But it's going to help me, I think, get a pin through the opposite direction, which is going to be better, and because I am putting this pin through this way and I hit the floor here, I can't get a cotter pin the other end of that pin, and so I have to essentially tape or bolt the top of it to hold it in place. This will make it a little bit easier to accommodate that. So let's go get this mod done. So now that I've got my hole, this is the factory hole, and this here is the hole through the other direction. So I've got that drilled all the way through. You can see those two basically intersect exactly right there in the middle. What I'm now going to do is just simply change out their bracket, this factory bracket, for basically just two of these stacked up essentially like this, with a pin going through this way with the rod down the middle, of course, here. And you can see that basically the height of these two are both about exactly on center at 1.5 inches. So that just works out really nicely. Otherwise I would have had to drill some holes or make a new bracket. So I just have to put these in there. So now I just got to put the pin in. Let's get this done. This will be in exactly the same spot because this is all set out for exactly the right length to be fully captive in just the right distance when it's in, and then of course all the way out just the right distance to fill in here in my dinette. So let's get that installed and get this thing back to working. In my process of attaching the solid surface dining table is to put some dabs of Sitka 252 adhesive sealant onto some slotted 80-20 corners. And the reason why I use slotted 80-20 corners, that way I can actually adjust them up and down to make sure they're accommodating for any of the thickness of the adhesive sealant itself, getting this thing perfectly level. And also by putting it only on the corners, I can actually remove those corners or adjust them if I ever need to replace the table or to adjust it in some way. But of course, getting this down to basically perfection. So I'm measuring, by the way, down in millimeters. That way I can always see, because I got all the way down to 1/100th of a millimeter. That's a great way to really see it. Much easier than trying to deal in inches or even fractions. I could do the same in like decimals of inches instead of fractions of inches. This in millimeters is just a lot easier. I'm just doing basically whole numbers. And those two right there, they are within 1/4 of a millimeter of each other. Yeah, same down here. We're within 1 millimeter of each other. I am just going to let that sit. I've got enough pressure on it. I've tightened up my sliding clamps from underneath. So this thing's clamped down. The glue is setting. Resting on these tracks, I'll have a face plate here. I think it looks good. Let's go. Let's put myself to bed. And let's call this done. The first real finished piece in the camper is installed, finished. And now I am moving along here to get all these other finished pieces in and more things like lights and the rest of the electrical in and so forth. This is great. Now's the moment of truth. I'm going to try at the table. I had to come all the way over to reach my temporary switch that I've set up. I'm going to slide the table all the way in and all the way out. Just make sure I have no binding or anything anywhere I shouldn't. It seems to be about as center as it can be, plus or minus a millimeter on each side and on the end. Let's try it out before this glue sets up, because it's already getting quite tacky. And it won't be long before it is done. And here it is getting late at night, so I got to wrap this up so I can get to sleep. Let this dry up overnight. I'm just putting my finger here to feel if there's any movement, and meanwhile I'm watching it as well for any movement. I will measure it again once I pull it all the way out. I think it's about as perfect as I can get it. No clearance issues. But I'm going to leave it out so I can take it out so I can measure it once more. Leave it out a little bit. Just make sure that everything looks good from underneath before I go to bed. So this is my dining table. Beautiful Durasein countertop. Beautiful. Loving this. Yahoo! And that is video number 100 of my DIY Expedition Camper Truck Build Series. And I got so much cool stuff coming up of this very cool DIY Expedition Camper. So thank you for watching, subscribing, sharing, and definitely hang in. There's a lot to come in this very cool DIY Expedition Camper build.